Let's consider, it's not your imagination that more and more vehicles are appearing. If we go back to the financial crisis of 2007 and indeed the onset of it in 2005, 2006, vehicle manufacturers were imagining a future, and there were several aspects that happened. First, they removed an awful lot of stock that was carried around the world in spare parts, so that parts, particularly in collision repair, infrequent, slow-moving parts, would become special order, would only come from a national hub rather than even being held in district locations. For fast-moving regular service items, very little changed, but a whole lot of stock got purged out of the system. That was cash on the shelf that the companies needed. There was another aspect, and that is product support plus 10 years after the first build has been eased back to 7, and now the same manufacturers who led on doing that right now are trying to ease that back to plus 5 years. The symptoms? Well, just look at this. In 2010, these three brands, and believe me, this is across the entire piece, this is all vehicle companies, have the same story. If we look at the number of models, that increased by more than 50% in the last 8 years. This experiment has failed. It has absolutely failed, because we know certain model ranges now will not be replaced. So this is a peak. And the real problem, if you look on the right-hand side of the page, is that there we have almost in one case a doubling of model derivatives on sale between 2010 and 2018. This is a problem because in collision repair, we're dealing with the last column, the body-shaped derivative parts, the special parts, and it's those parts that will be first not to be supported because the fast-moving stuff gets recycled into future product. Panels, trim, specific to a body shape get superseded by subsequent evolutions. The total body count will increase slightly in the immediate future as we get special halo products, EVs, appear. But the overall trend is we will regress back towards the situation in 2010. What does that mean for the aftermarket? Well, consider that we've had 8 years to build to this position. As of now, all the products that are listed there have at least 10, maybe even 15 or more years of life. So we have, another 15, 20 years of this situation, even if all the manufacturers ease back their model count, their body unique count to a lower number now. That will happen by 2025. So you can see that we've got a lot of busyness going on. Meanwhile, vehicle manufacturers, because they have a relatively poor business model, they typically make returns of between 3 and 6% profit. That is simply not attractive compared with other kinds of commodity, and so doesn't attract investment money easily. And when we consider that a brand new product, a brand new vehicle, will cost somewhere around $1 billion to create from ground up. If we add a new line of powertrains, be it electric, hybrid or internal combustion, it doesn't really matter. That cost climbs to 2 or even 2.5 or even $3 billion. And remember the gestation period. If we're doing a brand new product from ground up, which is quite rare, then yeah, we're probably going to use a full 5+ years of development time before a single product is sold to return on that investment. So for those reasons, manufacturers have streamlined the major investments in engines, gearboxes, the underbody, suspension, subframes. And if we look at the trend, in 2010, these three manufacturers had between 5 and 6 major platform families serving the whole of their product line. And all of them have moved to essentially 2 in 2018. In green, I've marked the halo products. For example, R8, the Audi R8 is on its way out and won't be replaced. BMW have the dead-end i-Series. That has a future life, and new news is that there'll be a joint development between BMW and JLR to eke this out a little bit further. G29 is the Z4 jointly developed with Toyota because neither company could justify a coupe and a cabriolet by themselves. So they build it in Japan using different engines and a jointly developed product. And Mercedes also, AMG are migrating into modified, heavily modified regular production cars rather than unique cars. And the SL and SLK coupe cabriolets are near enough at the end of their lives and are probably not going to be replaced. So the big news is massive normalization in major investment. But for the parts that collision repair are involved with, the opposite has happened. We have shorter product support and we have more varieties, and in relatively static markets where the number of vehicles within, let's say, 5 or 10% remain about the same year on year, the truth is, by offering more models, it's diluted the model share, the market share for each model. So we have fewer parts for a particular model in any year to repair. Not a great situation. So I'm going to mention this, that the body shell, until now we've assumed, because this story has been rolling for at least 2 decades, the right material in the right place at the right cost. And cost in manufacturing terms is the maths, the economics behind the price point of the end product. And of course in the collision repair we've migrated, if we think about sort of 30, 40 years ago, mild steel bumper to bumper, to all kinds of materials including non-ferrous in a single body shell. So this is taken as read. I'm not sure that's really true, but that's taken as read. Now we have our new game on the block, and this is a symptom of those distresses that we're seeing, technology being driven from inside out. Advanced driver assist systems are the basis of autonomy and the many iterations that are available in between driver assist and autonomy. So we have here a range of sensors that look after the defense system of a vehicle, ranging from camera, LiDAR, ultrasonic sensors, video camera and static camera. We're going to go a little bit deeper into this. Here we have Mercedes-Benz A-Class W177 introduced at the very end of 2018. And this is MFA Evo, the baby platform that we saw on a slide a few slides ago. And this is an evolution of the previous A-Class. And yet here we see an ADAS suite which is on a par with the kind of systems that could be bought on an S-Class in 2016. And that is a symptom of the commodity price of the sensing systems, the evolution of the software, the sophistication of the systems that in continuous development, and that development has carried on during the product cycle of its predecessors and will carry on during the product cycle of this A-Class and its four products, sister products. In the performance, we've got a camera that could detect things up to 0.5 kilometre ahead. We have radar that could detect obstacles 1/4 kilometre ahead of the vehicle. And then we see a wider array, a broader cone angle for radar, which is pitched out at between 60 and 90 meters in front of the vehicle. So this is taking in peripheral vision. And then working around the vehicle, the light colored parts are ultrasonic sensors. Sideways, they point out and have a range of 4.5 meters, narrow cone angle, broader cone angle, pointing forwards or rearwards, 1.5 meters. And then at the back, in the case of Mercedes, we have 3 radar modules, one pointing straight backwards and 2 pointing sideways, and these cover off the blind spot. We also have, not shown on here, surround vision, so we could have simpler cameras on the bumper, on the boot lid or tailgate, and typically mounted on the door mirrors. And all of those sensors are networked together and work as a unit with electronic control of the brakes, electronic control of the engine, electronic control of the steering. And that means that we have a degree of correction that is possible. In other words, the driver is alerted to a potential problem. The alert escalates, and ultimately the system will try and take over to avoid collision, or if that's not possible, it will try and mitigate the consequences of collision by altering the trajectory of the vehicle's path. This was demonstrated by Nissan and Toyota in 2011 and 2012. It was seen then as fantasy. Here we are in 2019 and it is reality. Production car reality. One other caveat. Not all vehicles have all these systems. An A-Class can be bought almost bare. So this is a fully equipped vehicle with all options. And that represents in its own right a challenge for us in the aftermarket to know it could have the sensors, to know where they could be fitted, and then try and find out on the vehicle we're repairing what was fitted to that one. So if you look at the list of possible sensors, it is huge. We've got multiple radars on front end, now moving towards 3, 2 pointing sideways, 1 pointing forwards. Next generation LiDAR mounted on the bumper. This is a parallel capability to the radar, so nothing like the LiDAR that used to be fitted in the windscreen, which was a very, very simple small distance measurement device. Then we have, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, camera on the bumper, camera on the rear bumper, front bumper, rear bumper, possibly tailgate or boot lid, and on the door mirrors. And then 2 or 3 radar modules at the rear. And of course, on top of all of that, ultrasonic sensors. Typically 4 at the front or 6 at the front, 4 at the rear or 6 at the rear, depending on whether we've got side-facing sensors or not. Okay, this builds towards autonomy, and I want to look at this very handsome man here. No, I don't really. Anyway, this man could have lightning quick intellect, fantastic reflexes, but just consider the position of the person relative to the controls. And here we see directly the fantasy of the present autonomy image. Autonomy is presented as something that could happen and that we could resume control as we wish. That's possible, but I would suggest we can't resume control if we're about to have an accident, because this person needs to get back into position behind the controls, needs to assimilate what's going on and do all of that to beat what the electronics are doing at 1/3 of the speed of light. You see directly the fantasy. In this situation, if we really believed in autonomy, there wouldn't be a steering wheel. Arguably, there wouldn't be an instrument panel as we understand it today. Arguably, the person wouldn't even necessarily be sitting forwards. These are all big questions which vehicle manufacturers, governments and lobby groups around the world are considering right now. The autonomy story won't go away. It has a place. We already have aspects of this in trams, in trains and underground services. But this is about personalised autonomy with the freedom to go wherever the road network allows us to go. And that story will come. There's too much pressure behind it for it not to come. SAE define autonomy in 5 levels, and what we see on the left-hand side of the graph is blue, and this is where predominantly the human is in charge, and this is where most ADAS systems are. So initially we have on the first step either control of the steering or the brakes, usually brakes. The second step is where we combine control of steering and brakes, so we're able to stop the vehicle, reduce speed and possibly alter the path slightly to avoid collision. As we go forward across the page to level 3 to 5, there is more and more control from an external service. So by the time we get to level 5, there is no human interaction. The driver is an electronic service, broadcast and communicating live with the vehicle. This is the biggest challenge. And the easiest way to get this project off the ground is to provide safe, closed, unique travel destinations for this system. In other words, a little like a pedestrianised zone or a cyclist zone for autonomous vehicles. Exclude people like me in a vehicle with nothing brighter than my brain. How scary is that? So that's probably how autonomy is going to start off in major cities, in major areas, business districts, commerce districts, before it migrates out. I hope in my lifetime I'll be able to see autonomy as a possibility. And of course, then comes the big question. Do we ever make an autonomous vehicle possible to drive with a human? Is that possible? And we have to consider this. Today, automatically, humans have to learn how to drive. If we have autonomous vehicles in big enough numbers, it's quite conceivable we will have people who've never driven. And therefore, you know directly, if we consider how we all began learning to drive, somebody who's never driven can't realistically do very much inside a vehicle if the electronic systems fail. And that's where the big government questions come in. Who's liable? What are the backups? How does the system work? And already we're stuck on level 3, where those questions have started.